Okay, three, two, one. All right, welcome back to another edition of the Bebo Knows podcast. This is your host, Brian Bullock, and with me for edition 131 of the podcast, I have Mr. Jeffrey Benson. Jeffrey, thank you for joining the podcast.
Appreciate you having me on today, Brian.
Yeah, you've been, you've been somebody I wanted to have on for a little while now, and I know you've been kind of making your mark a little bit on Twitter, kind of ruffling some feathers. I don't know. You seem to have fun with Twitter, from what I gather. You seem to have a lighthearted nature about your Twitter. Your Twitter use as far as it relates to sports betting. But before we get into that topic, I wanted to since you're a first time guest, I normally have people introduce themselves from a gambling perspective. So kind of just getting an idea of your gambling roots, how you got interested in sports betting industry, sports you enjoy most, either from betting personally or maybe just from your role from behind the counter, any memorable bets, things of that nature, anything that you feel like would be a good introduction to your betting background. So feel free to take it away.
Yeah, so I'm 33. Been out here in Vegas since late 2012. Um, Basically grew up on the East Coast. Played sports kind of my whole life growing up in terms of, basketball, soccer, things like that. Always loved watching sports, loved the number side of things, the stats. That was something, that I really enjoyed growing up and looking through box scores and things like that. So it was just kind of natural between, playing sports and watching sports, that I had that sort of kind of love for it. So, late in high school, you kind of get, into the parlay cards, the March Madness pools, things like that. And then as I worked my way into college, had a bookie and things like that, used the, head credit outs and paper heads and stuff like that. I was playing a lot of poker and things like that through college. And back in 2012, this was obviously before PASPA was repealed. So really Vegas, was the only legal place within the United States, to really make your name when it came to gambling and being involved in the legalized scene. So graduated in 2012 from a small D3 school back east, and just got in the car with my dad and drove across country.
Okay,
And basically, go
okay,
ahead.
so you moved here with so you moved to Vegas with your dad then.
No, he just came. He was
Oh,
just
okay.
along for the. He was just along for the ride.
Oh,
I
okay.
came
Okay.
out. Didn't have a job or anything. Was able to get an apartment, and kind of that was really how I got my start out here. So
Okay.
probably bet for 3 to 6 months before my mom really encouraged me to get a job and meet some people and kind of have some structure and routine in my life. And I was able to get a ticket writing job at Station Casinos. Did that for probably 5 years before becoming a line supervisor for a couple of years. That was where I met Matt, who's our sportsbook director over at Circa. We kind of struck up a friendship in terms of him betting with me across the counter and things like that. Then ultimately, when he got the position over at Circa, I decided to come join him in terms of being a part of the management team that opened up Circa Sports, and obviously been over there since early in 2019. And we've been in business a little more than 3.5 years now. And so like I said, been in the industry little over 10 plus years, and really enjoying where I'm at and the things that we're trying to do.
Okay. Great. So yeah, I noticed like maybe it timed out to when you started with Circa, but I feel like you've had a more online presence as of late. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
accurate.
Okay.
Obviously I was, following people on Twitter and doing stuff like that for betting, related things. But in terms of my outspokenness, and kind of promoting, why I believe the sharp book model, is the most profitable model. And then also from an ethical component, yeah, certainly ramped up, my outspokenness over the last 3.5 years. And obviously that has elicited, some praise from some folks in the industry, and obviously it's ruffled quite a few feathers. So yeah, certainly happy to talk through that as well.
Yeah. So my first topic here kind of touches base on that. So, you know, and I guess I could ask this question for myself because sometimes I'm on Twitter and I'm like, why am I on Twitter so much? What am I doing here? What do I hope to gain from this? Like for me, like I guess I kind of answered that question with, just simple, like sometimes mindless entertainment, I guess. But when you're as you become more active and you're tweeting your perspectives from your work with Circa and whatnot, like what are you hoping to gain or hoping others hope others gain, like in your daily tweeting of, like, maybe debunking myths or inaccuracies that are taught to novice betters, or like among other topics that you bring up? Like what's your, like, what do you hope to achieve, either like on a short term or long term level, when you're sharing your information or your disdain for certain things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to kind of not conflate the two in terms of some of the things that I'm tweeting, are personal opinions, and have nothing to do with circus sports.
Sure.
And then there's obviously quite a few things that I tweet that, I think are building our brand and highlighting some of, the different value propositions that, I think that we kind of bring to the market. So I think there's really a sort of a difference between the two, from a corporate side of things. Um, trying to highlight, like I said, what I believe are our value propositions, being organic, being honest, being transparent, being readily accessible to people to answer questions. I think if I were to walk into a Vegas based sports book right now, or, be playing, with a regulated operator here in the United States, um, to be able to have access to management, to ask questions about deposits and withdrawals, um, to ask questions about, what I can get on this specific market, all of those kind of different things. I think it's something that you don't really see a lot in today's industry. I think you look at a lot of these companies, and they're kind of, you know, faceless and nameless kind of corporations in the sense that you don't really have access to their management team. You can't really ask questions. You can't get an answer on what you can get on this specific market. You don't get an answer as to why you were limited here, and things like that. And I think what we try to do is just be, open and upfront about what we're doing, what our menu looks like, what we're taking on each specific market. And, I think from a bettor's perspective, given that we kind of target more of the non-recreational clientele, I think them understanding the liquidity they can get in certain markets, knowing that they're going to be able to come back tomorrow and get the same limits, if not higher,
Yeah.
as we continue to grow our business and our volume, things like that. That I would say that's a lot of, what my tweets from a corporate perspective look like. And then, a lot of the stuff I say is, better, just my personal opinions on the industry and how other people run their companies and things like that. It's really just trying to educate people within the space. I look back and I think of where I was, in 2012, and the things that I knew and didn't know, and, getting behind the counter and seeing how, maybe a soft book runs their model, and, how they treat players, and, what their approach to risk management is and stuff like that. Having worked for, station casinos, which I would consider to be, part of the soft book model. And then obviously now working for Circa, being part of the sharp book model, having kind of those polarizing opposites. I think being on both, sides, of the topic, and being able to see, from the lens of, how both parties run their business, I think I have enough experience and expertise, to speak highly on the matter. And I think when you look at Twitter, there's really no operator, or not a lot of people, who are behind the counter, talking about this stuff. You really just
Sure.
see, the sharp better talking about this stuff and why they were limited, and, all of these different things. And I think being able to provide a different and unique, perspective on that, something that's really helped to grow our brand. And like I said, highlight those different value propositions. And, you know, um, yeah, I mean, I would say that's kind of what I'm trying to gain out of it. and I think when you look at the industry, there's probably never been a time where there's more content right now in the space. And when I say that, there's also probably never been a time where there's more bad content in the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at TikTok and Twitter and these people who are selling picks and touting and doing all these different things, and obviously I was just on Circles Off for an hour and a half, and we kind of went in circles, and I don't think we got really anywhere. But I think when you think about all of those things, for me, just trying to help educate the better, talk about and break through some of the myths or misconceptions, whether it comes as it relates to a book wants 50-50 action, we're setting traps, all these different things, that I think there's so many misguided notions about. And I think having somebody behind the counter, who can debunk some of that stuff and talk about it at a high level, I like to think it goes a long way in terms of educating those in the space who maybe don't necessarily know what to look for or who to look to guidance for.
Okay. Yeah, and to yeah, going off that last point, like anytime I've looked at those like numbers, whoever posts them, whether it be a book or whoever, like you know, it's like always red flags for me. Like I never like, I, you know, I don't see the value in it, or I don't believe it, because I feel like they might be just trying to, you know, produce content just for the sake of content, and it really doesn't mean anything. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think you see that in a lot of people in the space just trying to produce content for content, and
yeah,
the headlines are clickbait. And I think you made a great point. There's not a lot of truth behind those numbers and what people are saying. And I think a more important part to be gained is to really look. Obviously, when you look at a lot of that stuff, you have to look at the book where it's coming from. You have to evaluate that in terms of the meritness of whether the truth of the source, I guess you could say. But I think for me the most important aspect when you're looking at that stuff is where were the bets taken, meaning at what prices. And I think a lot of
yeah,
times when people say 80% of the public's on this, that's all well and good, but A, is it coming from a book that takes sharp action? And then B, furthermore, did you take 10% of the bets at +5? Did you take 20% of the bets at +4.5? Did you take 30% of the bets at +4? And now all of a sudden you're at 3.
yeah,
I think in the content side of, the content side of the space, I think the storytelling is important. And when you tell a certain story, telling all of the facts behind how you got to something, you know, telling the facts behind how you got to a certain handicap, telling the facts about how a number went from +5 to +3.
sure,
Those are the things that I think, a lot of these content creators could do a better job of, or a lot of these books could do a better job of. Whereas when you send it in one tweet or one, you know, one kind of statement that doesn't have a lot of context behind it, I think that's where, I find some of the disingenuousness, and ultimately where I think it misleads bettors into believing things that may or may not be true.
yeah. And there's probably ways where that information could be, presented that where it could be, actually beneficial, but I don't know if there's any incentive to, break it down the way you said. Like if a line changes like 8 minutes from now, like, somebody's betting a different line in 8 minutes than they were 8 minutes ago, and it's like, well, that will influence the amount of bets on a certain line. So, um,
Yeah, and I
so
mean, it's not talking about the new information that's come into the market. It's not talking
sure,
about, better A with market influence, made a full limit bet at this book, which is, 200,000 on an NFL side day of, those are the things that are really moving the market. Those are the things that are influencing why a number, went from, 3.5 to 3 and things like that. And I think when you look back, and you see a lot of those tweets and a lot of those stories and a lot of those talking points, the context behind those things aren't really shared, or they're shared from places that, don't have a lot of credibility.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, I know. I was looking at like recent tweets, and it's actually from the topic that I want to touch base now on is relationships with sharp bettors. And I saw like a week or two ago, you were actually talking to someone that I've hung out with a bunch of times this year. Chat Tim 3, Rick. Um,
Yes,
and
yes.
so yeah,
The boys came down and had a good time at Circa watching the game. So yeah, it
so
was nice to catch up with those guys.
so I get the impression that I kind of feel like I kind of know the answer to this, but um, it does seem like you have like relationships with some of the sharper guys, Twitter and outside of Twitter, because I'm sure there's a good contingent of bettors that aren't on Twitter. But like besides like offering like high limits, are there other ways that you cultivate positive relationships with the bettors that keep you and the bettor happy?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at it, I've always said, we've always said that, the relationship between bookmaker and bettor doesn't, and furthermore, shouldn't have to be adversarial. And, whether somebody's beating you for thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even millions of dollars, that doesn't have to change what that relationship looks like. And, obviously we cater to a more non-recreational crowd given, what our model is, but I think, there's an information exchange, between Circa Sports and the people who are booking the bets, and people who are walking through our doors and playing on our app or over our counter. And, I think, Matt, who's our book director and somebody who's bet professionally, he's talked about this a lot. You have to value players for the information they're providing in the form of bets. And how do you do that? And that's paying them in the form of the limits that you're giving them. So, like I said, for us, some of the best relationships I have are with people who are beating us for the most amount of money. And, like I said, I think a lot of that comes from when you look at, Matt Metcalf and Chris Bennett, who's our director of risk. Those are guys who've bet professionally before. And, I think a lot of the people, in our risk room, and a lot of the people who work on our team, are people who bet in general. When you look at our CEO and our owner, Derek Stevens, he's somebody who's a gambler. He understands the business. I think from that perspective, what we try to provide for our players is, you can walk into a sports, and ask for a nickel on a prop, and they look at you, like you've got a ski mask on with a thawed off shotgun in your hand, and you're ready to rob the place, on something that you may have, $25 worth of expected value when you calculate your edge. So, for us, I think we just try to put ourselves in the shoes of our bettors, to do with kind of our background and things like that. So, I do, with Spanky, with Rufus, with a lot of these people you see on Twitter who have made quite a name for themselves within the industry. And, I think whereas you look at a lot of these other places, they look at these guys, with a criminal-esque mindset, because they're ultimately going to be winners in the long term. And I think ultimately, able to utilize, their information to both, shape your line and make it more efficient, and help get you to the right number, as cheaply and as efficiently as possible.
Sure.
I think it can be a really good working relationship. And, for me, having these guys reach out and say, can I get X, Y, and Z on this market? I'm coming down, to withdraw 200,000, can you have it ready for me in cash in the next 15 minutes? Like, all of these different things just provide an elevated level of customer service and experience. Whereas if you walk into a book and you're cashing out for 5,000, or trying to make a $5,000 bet, getting a clear, concise answer as to whether you can do that, or, what that cash out process looks like, it's just kind of a miserable experience. So everything that we do is geared towards, making it the best possible experience for our bettors. And, yeah, I mean, I think that really kind of summarizes what we're doing, from that perspective.
Okay. So yeah, with all the discussion about like, the high limits and whatnot, you obviously have that working for you, but is there anything like, I guess this is a classic interview question. What are some areas that you and your team might be looking to improve upon, or like maybe enhance as the, months and years go by? Like, as obviously you're kind of still relatively new on the scene, so like, there's probably still some growing pains that you've gone through in terms of, you know, operations or what have you. I don't know the business lingo enough to like know all the different things that could, influence or sorry, could be a problem. But what are some areas that, things maybe you've learned, or things that you're looking to improve upon as like as time goes on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. I mean, for all the things that, or a lot of the things that we've done right, we got a long ways to go to be a major, to continue to make inroads within the industry, and, certainly be a major player in the long run. So, when you think about circus sports, it's not for everybody, in the sense that when you look at our menu, it's really meat and potatoes. And, if you're somebody who likes to bet a ton of props, a ton of in-game things like that, circus sports may not be the sports book for you today. But ultimately, we hope to earn your business in the long run. So, I would say some of the things that we're working on every day to get better. We would certainly like to have more in-game offerings. When you think about particularly, regular season baseball, regular season basketball, both NBA and college, being able to offer more college football in game, things like that. I think being able to add to more of our in-game menu when you think of the four major sports, and not just playoff time, is something that we're strongly working towards. I would say our menu depth, in the sense that when you look at what we do, a lot of what we do is meat and potatoes, major markets. When you think of sides, totals, money lines, ultimately in the long run, we'd like to add more derivatives to the menu. We'd like to add more props. During the NBA season, we'd like to do props, on NBA games during the weekend, and not just it be something that we offer, for the playoffs and things like that. You could say the same thing about baseball, say the same thing about hockey. Being able to offer props on every single NFL game, not just the primetime games. I
Sure.
would say those are some of the things that we're working towards, from a menu depth perspective. Today, could we, do a lot more than what we're doing now? Absolutely. A lot of these other operators, they say they have the biggest menu in the world, but when you look at the limits they're taking on some of these things, or the limits that certain individuals get on these things, it can really just be dressed up as sports betting for decoration. So
Sure.
for us, anything that we put on the menu, we want to be able to at least take $1,000 to, if not higher. So I would say in the future, when we add more derivatives, more props, and more in-game, that will be done, and that the limits will be fair and consistent, with what you see, for a lot of the offerings that we have at the current moment.
Sure.
And then I'd say the other thing that we're working on is our technology. I think obviously, given that, our hub is Nevada, I think we struggle from a technology perspective. We'd ultimately in the future probably love to have like a cash out option, be able to offer, correlated parlays, or some sort of same game parlay type of offering, just to have a better app experience and a better, user interface, that can certainly open up the doors for us to get, more, a larger, wider range of customers. So I would say when you look at the app in Nevada, the best thing about it to me is the fact that, if you want to bet 200,000, you can bet 200,000 on an NFL side day of, and the bet's going to shoot through with, no approval process, no spinning wheel, and things like that. But we'd also obviously like to build on the app, and, have some of those features that I think, customers ultimately want in the long run. We'd love to add to more of our, payment methods, withdrawal methods, and just have a better user experience in terms of UI and UX. So I would say between that, menu depth, and then, just scaling, on a granular level, in terms of being in more than one state, growing our team, both from a operational perspective, from a frontline perspective, and then obviously in our risk room. I would say those are some of the things that would be in the 3 to 5 year plan,
Okay.
that will ultimately make Circa Sports, a better experience for anybody who wants to try our product out.
I'm interested to see see how it looks, because I know that you guys are coming to Illinois soon. So
Yeah, Illinois, obviously, that's been a kind of a frustrating thing, just because the licensure process has taken so long. But we're certainly excited to serve, Illinoisans, probably middle of next year, as
okay.
we get closer to the start of next football season. That'll obviously be state number 4 for us. But like I said, it's been a little bit of a delay getting there. But like I said, we're excited, obviously, with what we'll be able to offer that market, when that time comes.
So so kind of being like a newer um, entity, like is it, because I know there's certain industries that it's like almost impossible for um, like newcomers to actually make a dent in the in the landscape. Do you guys worry about that at all?
No, I don't. For us, we're playing the long game. I think when you look around the industry and you've seen some of the things that are happening, over the last couple of years, obviously there's going to be some mass consolidation that's coming within the market. And for us, we're playing the long game.
Okay.
I think there's not many people who are doing the low hold, high volume model. I think when you look at the industry, it's very cookie cutter esque, in the sense that the DraftKings, FanDuel's, PointsBets, Barstool, they're all doing the same thing. They're all going after the same customer. They're incinerating hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of marketing, in this, land grab, every single quarter. I think from a profitability standpoint, I think a lot of these, businesses are struggling. So I think from our perspective, being a private company, not having to answer to shareholders,
Okay.
and things like that, it allows us to run our business a little bit differently, come at things from a different perspective. And, I think as the education of the industry continues, and some of these promos and free bets and match deposits, and some of that stuff kind of dries out and runs its course, and you see players get more price sensitive, I think that's where we'll be able to make some real inroads within the industry. We continue to grow year after year, here in Nevada, and we're certainly hopeful to see that in other states as we continue to expand.
Okay. Now, yeah, one last question related to like your relationship with sharp bettors. So I know that you pride yourself on the high limits and all that. Has there ever been a situation where you've had to limit a bettor for whatever reason, whether it be like a certain market being compromised, or maybe they, maybe there's something about the bettor that is just kind of a red flag. Have you ever had to do that in your short time?
No, I mean,
Uh,
for us, like I said, unless the gaming control board, bars you, or bans you from playing, at our casinos, we will never, ever, ever, ever limit a winning bettor. And you could beat us for thousands, you could beat us for hundreds of thousands, or you could beat us for millions of dollars. And really, two things happens in that scenario. We utilize your information to make our line, sharper, and ultimately earn to your bets. Or B, we have to get better. And if we don't, then we close and go out of business. So as long as I will be at Circa Sports, we will never, ever, ever, um, kick somebody out for winning. And we will never give somebody less than our standard limits, that anybody in the world is entitled to on any specific market for any reason. That's something that, we've built, our business on, that transparency. And when anybody walks into the door, whether they're Billy Walters or whether they're your dad, they're always entitled to those standard limits that you get in the app or at the counter. And if we're ultimately able to take more and handle your action, that's certainly something we'll strive to do as well. And, each and every year as we continue to get more players and build our liquidity, those limits are going to increase. So, I think when you look at, our NFL limits, we're taking 200,000 day of, as we continue to get more liquidity in that market, that'll increase. When you look at our college football, we took as high limits this year, probably somewhere between 40,000 a game to 100,000 a game, depending upon, the quality of it and how much two-way we were seeing. So for us, our limits continue to increase year after year. And yeah, it's a free, fair, and transparent marketplace that welcomes all bettors. And no matter how much you win, you'll always be welcome back, and we'll pay you with a handshake and a smile.
Great. So yeah, let me see. I'm trying to see if I'm trying to buy the Zoom upgrade to Pro right now. It looks like they offer like a month long package here. So yeah, let me before I get into that, let me touch base on one more topic here because it might have to get cut off in the next 7 minutes here because to do the 40-minute segments here. But in terms of like the rec and offshore books, is there anything that you've seen others do at rec or offshore books that you've actually applied to Circa, or like the reverse? Have you seen them copy anything that you've do besides the line, or the book model so like drastically different that like there's really no like mirroring between the two?
I'd say the latter. I really, I mean, not to, you know, hyperbole, yeah. I mean, I think when you look at it, not to, talk in hyperboles, but, I think, there's not much that they're doing, that we really incorporate into what we're doing. Obviously when you look at the screen and you think about market makers and, originators and things like that, obviously the soft book model, they're looking to the Circa, the Pinnacle, the Chris's of the world, when they originate markets, and, they're copying, and that, that works for them. For us, we try to, like I said, we try to originate as much as possible and utilize the information of our bettors to get us to where we want to be, and ultimately to utilize that information to, to earn to their bet. So I would say when you look at, the soft book model and, some of what they're doing, I would say there's such a corollary between, that there's, it's such the antithesis of what we're doing, and what, Pinnacle is doing and what Chris is doing and what some of these market making books are doing, versus what you see in the traditional recreational landscape, where it's, low limits, high holds, deep menus, and booting anybody with a pulse. So it'd be hard to make kind of comparisons,
Sure.
in terms of what they're doing. I'm not a huge fan of their model and things like that, but I think there is some, I think they know how to scale. I think some of those shops have, better technology than ours. And yeah, I mean, I think you can always look at certain places and see, pick and choose things that, a certain company's doing, which you could apply to your book and, help you grow. But I would say by and large, in terms of the risk management stuff, and the general overarching view of how they run their business, I would say there's, it's not overly synonymous.
Okay. Now, do you worry like, and again, I probably know the answer to this based on where you're working, but I kind of wanted to ask, with all the sports betting that continues to expand, and it seems like in most markets it seems to be the soft books that are taking over a lot of the licenses and whatnot, depending on how the state works. Do you anticipate the market continuing to be mostly dominated by those recreational operators, or do you see any signs that indicate maybe a more customer-focused model that caters to the like high end bettors that could be on the rise?
No, I foresee the market continuing with the same trend that I've seen for the last couple of years. Which is the recreational based model, in which the menu is deep, the limits are low, the hold is high. That seems to be what these corporations, who have shareholders to answer to. It seems like the model that they want to run. While Matt and myself don't necessarily believe that to be the most profitable model. That seems to be the model that's in vogue and in rage. Right now. And I think when you see a lot of, like I said, these promos and free bets, and a lot of that stuff die down, and you see some of these recreational players get booted or limited or things like that, and the education in terms of price sensitivity increases. I think then is where we can really make some inroads with the market at that point. But I would say right now, there's a craze for the same game parlays and things of that nature, which doesn't really fit into the mold of what we're doing at the current time.
Okay. Yeah, and I feel like, and this is just sporadic like viewing of tweets. Even people that don't even consider themselves to be sharp, I've seen get caught off from these books, and maybe it's because they like got the good side of a line like 2 or 3
Well,
times.
that's the thing. I mean, these players get profiled within 2 or 3 bets. They may run into some accidental CLV. Um, they may hit an injury game, and it moves, 3 or 4 hours later, and it just, is happenstance or coincidence. And, I think with all these algorithms and, the stake factors and things like that, I think these companies are far too quick to cut off these recreational or non-recreational players, without fully understanding what their edge is and whether they're going to be a lifetime winner in the long run. And I think, by doing so, they're ultimately eliminating a lot of the volume that they could bring to their platform. And, by in turn, I think that's going to, hurt them in terms of their earning ability over the course of the customer's lifetime.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, and by the way, yeah, I don't need to cut this call off. I was able to. I'm getting like a month subscription to the Zoom here. So, anyways, I just wanted to make sure that it was known that we didn't have to interrupt this call for whatever reason. So I did want to continue. This is like more on the light-hearted side of things, with this being a couple days away from Christmas and New Year's and whatnot. Um, you know, I wanted to get both like from a betting from the book perspective and also just kind of a personal perspective, some questions here. So the first one I had relating to the holiday season here was what you anticipate your biggest draws during the holidays being, because like you got the it seems like almost kind of a Christmas for you when an NFL falls on you know where they're playing games on Christmas Day, where there's multiple games on Christmas Day. So I'm wondering, whether it be NFL, NBA, or otherwise, like what do you anticipate being your biggest draws?
Yeah, NFL is always king. I think the NFL moving, the 12 game or the 11 games up to Saturday, um, Christmas Eve, and then obviously having 3 games on Christmas Day, that Sunday. I think that'll be the bulk of the action, or the majority of the action that we see. Um, like I said, NFL is always king. It's the sport that you're going to do the most handle on every year, and it's obviously the most popular for players. I would say, interestingly, on the other side, 5-10 years ago, I would have said bowl season was something that was supremely popular, something that bettors, both recreational and non-recreational, loved. And I think that's really changed, particularly over the last couple of years since COVID. When you think about opt-outs, coaches leaving, people, transferring, and putting their name into the portal and things like that, I think recreational bettors are far less likely to bet on bowl season, or they're only going to bet day of and not necessarily leading up to the game, just because of, you know, the the info asymmetry between that of a recreational player and a non-recreational player in terms of knowing who's leaving, knowing who's not, where coaches are going, who's going to play in these games and things like that. There's just not as much of a there's just not as much of a need for those kind of bettors, given all of the opt-outs and things like that.
Sure.
There's not
Yeah.
as much excitement to bet those kind of games.
Yeah, and the thing that I always heard from the group of people that I've had on here and that I've talked to on Twitter, that like variance is a good thing for for bettors, and that's it's very highly volatile, but I'm guessing that the rec bettors aren't as interested in that as as maybe some of the sharper guys are.
Yeah, I mean, they're not on Twitter. They're not watching, all these beat reporters. They're not, they're not watching the screen, seeing how these games are moving and things like that. So, like I said, that info asymmetry, I think, has only grown in the last couple of years as it relates to bowl season. And I think
Sure.
bowl season was, for the recreational player, was a lot funner and a lot, more enjoyable to bet, 2, 3, 4 years ago than it is today.
Okay. Now with just I guess either from a enjoyment perspective, from a being a better or just an enjoyer of sports, are there any sports during this time of the year that you either enjoy booking or watching the most? Like, something that maybe brings you a little bit of joy, or
Yeah, for me, I love the NFL. I love betting on the NFL. I haven't done it this year just because I've been so busy, but typically I'll help Chris Bennett, who's our director of risk, in terms of making NFL prop numbers and things like that. So I would say for me, I love NFL season. Helping to provide the guys in our risk room with injuries and information and things like that is really something that I enjoy. And then, like I said, working on Super Bowl and draft props and weekly props, for the primetime games is something that I enjoy helping Chris with. Obviously, haven't been able to do it this year just because I've been so busy with things. But I would say that's really, my number one thing during the fall and winter months. And then obviously when we turn the calendar, I always enjoy the golf season. So
okay,
that's something that I'm, betting on a weekly basis and watching the market and enjoy that. So
okay,
yeah, between NFL right now and then obviously when we turn the calendar, golf, I would say those are the two things that I would say I probably enjoy the most.
okay. Now, when it comes to the upcoming college football playoff and the NFL playoffs, are there particular teams that like from a booking perspective that you um, are looking to hopefully have advance either whatever those sports, whether advance to the playoff or advance to the final of the college football playoff, based on like the type of money or traffic that they could bring to your book? Do you guys have preferences, like, or are you even allowed to state something like that publicly?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the college football playoff, if it's Georgia versus Michigan, or it's Ohio State versus Michigan, I would say those two games would be the games that would draw the most.
Okay,
So I would say just from a handle perspective, I would say probably most sports books would be rooting for TCU to lose to Michigan,
sure.
just given the handle that we think we would get, on the championship game for two of those bigger teams. And then when you look at NFL, I would say for us, we're rooting against the Chiefs. We took a decent sized wager before the year started on the Chiefs. I think it was 10-1. Obviously, we have them, and I think they're plus 415 right now. So I would say, anybody winning in the NFL minus the Chiefs would probably be a decent result for us, given that we've kind of booked against the Chiefs all year.
Okay, and to like and to emphasize, like, the one thing that I think are that's good about like your book, not to like just promote your book, but one of the good things about a market that you guys have is I know that you have yes and no bets with those kind of things. So if somebody was saying no to the Chiefs, they can certainly bet that. Obviously, it would be minus whatever, but like
Yeah,
you know,
it's a fantastic point.
it's
I
um,
think when you think about the stock market, it's a true marketplace because if you want to buy Apple, you can buy Apple. And if you want to sell Apple, you can sell Apple. When you look at sports betting, hardly any places in the world offer yes nos, and I think for us, offering a yes no, it really provides that transparent marketplace in which you can buy a team and you can sell a team, and I think it really provides the protection for the player in the sense that they know they're not going to be price gouged. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, when you think about, let's say just for example, the Chiefs, we take a big bet on them preseason, and now we're heavy in terms of liability on them. Well, we have the whole year obviously to work it off, but I would say when you look at another book that does not offer yes nos, they could take a big bet at 10-1 and they could go to the bottom of the market, meaning that if the market was in the 5-1, 6-1 range, that book could, in essence, put the Chiefs up at 4-1, be the worst price in market on that team, and a bettor doesn't really have any recourse to do anything about it. Whereas at Circus Sports, we take a big bet on somebody and we go to the bottom of the market. We have to be really cognizant of the price we're at. And I say that because we have a sell side. So the lower we go on the Chiefs, meaning the worst price that we offer on the yes side, the better price that we're going to ultimately then be offering on the no side.
sure.
And having the yes no side, I think it really protects bettors because we can't price gouge from that hold perspective, and we can't artificially lower a team to whatever number that we arbitrarily want to, because when we have that sell side, we're going to have sharp bettors coming in, laying that no price,
Yeah,
getting us back to what in essence is the true market price. So having that yes no allows that two-way action. It allows people to hedge. It allows people to arb. It allows people to scalp. It just provides so many different options for people. And like I said, it protects bettors in the sense that we can't arbitrarily lower a team or a player, to an unbettable number, without giving that person the ability, to sell that player or that team at our sports book.
yeah, and I've never done this personally myself, but I know that the hold percentages on those futures at a lot of those rec books are just ridiculous, and
Yeah,
you know,
it's a great point because you hit the nail on the head. For us, we have a desired hold percentage, and when you think about it for like our Masters future pool, DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever, they could be at a 35% theoretical hold for their Masters pool. Whereas for us, by the time we close, we're going to be in the neighborhood of 12 or 13%. And for us, by having these yes nos, when you take a bet on somebody at 50-1 and you lower them to 40-1, thereby increasing your theoretical hold percentage, we're then going to raise up other individuals to get back to that targeted or
sure,
desired hold percentage that we're at. And I think by having the yes nos and having a targeted hold percentage, that we publicize, and B, remain committed to always getting to when we take limit bets and we're raising and lowering people in a specific pool. I think to your point, it really helps bettors find the best odds, and it really, I think it's a nice thing from a consumer perspective.
yeah. Honestly, I haven't paid close enough attention to that myself in the few times that I have bet future markets, but I can only imagine that when a book is lowering someone from like 10-1 to like 4-1, like you said, that they're probably not hiring the odds of those teams in between.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I can
like,
you can
and the,
take out the probably in that statement.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they certainly aren't. I mean,
yeah,
when you open a future pool, it's probably that's probably at a lot of these recreational books. That's probably going to be the lowest hold percentage you see at that time because, like I said, once the bet starts coming in, and the odds for certain players or teams get lowered, To your point, there's not that innate desire by these companies who are essentially stealing from people to ultimately raise other teams or players to get back to that hold percentage. So,
Sure.
yeah, like I said, a lot of price gouging. So, if you're a recreational or a non-recreational player, make sure you're betting into books or future pools that have the lowest theoretical hold.
Sure.
If you're shopping these different, if you're shopping these different prices from book to book to book, you can certainly reduce your synthetic hold, that you're betting into.
Makes sense. All right, so before we get into some of the listener questions here, some more personal questions just to get to know Jeff a little bit better. So what do you have any, so like these are kind of your go-to or your favorites. So I have a list of a few things here. Go-to Christmas movies, like one or two or three. Do you have any favorites?
Die Hard and Home Alone.
Okay. Yeah, I would say my answers changed during the my lifetime. Like, Home Alone's the first one I remember watching in the theaters. So that I held on to that for quite a bit. And also one of my nephews, he's like going to be 4 and he loves that movie. But I would say that I maybe with age, I've started to relate more to the Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon Christmas Vacation. So,
Okay.
okay, so now Christmas songs. Do you have any like? I know some people love Christmas songs, some people can't stand them. Do you have any that you enjoy?
I don't. For me, every
Okay,
day when I'm driving into work, I'm usually listening to a football podcast or
okay,
some sports gambling related podcast. So for
okay,
me, I'm not doing a ton of Christmas music.
okay. So and Circa's not pumping any Christmas music into the loudspeakers during the downtimes of sports.
I'd be surprised if the DJ at Stadium Swim is doing any Christmas related music, but I could certainly be wrong.
Okay. All right. So with Christmas, in terms of meal, do you have a go-to meal? Like, I don't know, with living in Vegas, if you're hanging out by yourself or with friends or uh, anyone on Christmas, but do you have a go-to food? I know some people are big into the food scene here.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like the traditional kind of Thanksgiving stuff, turkey stuff and mashed potatoes.
Okay.
You can carry that over to Christmas, or steak and potatoes is good for me. So
Okay.
I would say those are kind of my two holiday meals or something that I remember growing up.
Okay. Now, so Christmas traditions, you got any, like, since you've moved to Vegas about 10 years ago, are there any new traditions that you've started that, that are, that have been fun?
I mean, for me, I don't have a wife or kids, so it's not for me. Typically, obviously, in this business, there's really no holidays. So,
Sure.
and obviously with the contest running, there's a lot of things on my plate. So for me, usually spending Christmas and Thanksgiving in the sports book, watching the games and being a part of that, holiday atmosphere and things like that
Okay.
is typically how I spend the holidays out here. Given I currently don't have a wife or kids.
Sure. Do you guys get a lot of, in the few years that you've been open, have you gotten a lot of foot traffic on Christmas?
We did. When I think back to Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was busy before the late game, and I would say with Christmas this year, I would say Saturday, Christmas Eve will probably be busier than Christmas would be my
Okay.
thought. But NBA is always popular given you have 5 fantastic games, and I think this year having NFL to go with those NBA games, I think later in the day, once people have spent times with their families and things like that, we'll definitely have some good traffic in the book as it relates to that.
Okay. And then the last holiday question here, with New Year's coming up, do you have a drink of choice with New Year's that you like to break out?
Yeah, I'm not a huge alcoholic guy, so I'd steer towards maybe the apple cider or the hot cocoa, depending
Okay.
upon how warm or cold it is. But
Sure.
for me, I'm not making that stuff, so it'd have to be somebody making it for me. But yeah, if somebody makes it, I'll certainly drink some apple cider or some hot cocoa, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, and does being in Vegas, like having like hot drinks, does it like, because you said you came from the East Coast, so like, you're not like right now we're like I'm looking outside my window right now and see like snow on top of my car. I'm guessing you probably don't miss that aspect of the East Coast.
I certainly don't. I grew up in Virginia, Northern Virginia.
Okay,
Obviously it was cold back there. It snowed during the winter and things like that. So being out here, it's kind of a hoodie or a golf pullover kind of
sure.
weather. It's not something where you ever got to break out the winter coat. So
Yeah,
certainly a little bit of a different change of environment. But I certainly don't miss the cold. And obviously, when you think about this week and all the college football and the NFL, it's certainly a cold weather week on the East Coast, and it's certainly nice to be out on the West Coast here and not having to deal with a ton of that stuff.
sure. And I'm sure you guys have to keep an extra eye on the weather reports with how fast some of those things change because you
Oh,
know we
absolutely.
because I know we were originally projected for a lot more snow, but in the Chicago area here, but now it's just mainly just the wind. But like I
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the other myths. I mean, I think when you think about it, I think people automatically assume just auto bet the under when there's snow,
mhm,
but really you have to focus more so on the wind than the
yeah,
snow, particularly if the snow has already fallen. Um, so yeah, I would say that's kind of something that I've seen on Twitter adamantly discussed here over the last couple of weeks, just in terms of auto betting all these unders. When I think you got to do a little bit more digging in terms of finding out what the wind's going to be like.
sure,
Will the snow have already fallen, or will it be falling during the game and things like that? And that'll
yeah.
obviously have a lot to do with the handicap and where the number closes.
Yeah. People don't realize that, like, yeah, it actually helps the offense in many cases.
Correct. Correct.
So, yeah, you'll get a lot of value sometimes if you really like an over if it's just going to be snow related, not wind. But okay, so we have some listener questions here. There was a lot more of those in this one than in the more recent podcast here. So I'm going to start with Fat Music 14. He asked if you ever sneak up on the roof to rip heaters with Derek.
I don't. But yeah, I spend plenty of time with him at the bar and in his office and things like that. And there's nobody better in terms of being a CEO and owner and being readily available on the casino floor, in the sports book, watching games, at the bar, having drinks. Yeah, he's the best in the business. But I'm not a smoker, so I'll let him do the smoking and yeah, kind of go
Smoking,
from there.
smoking for two, I guess, if he's hanging out with you. Um,
Exactly.
So yeah, same with me here. So okay, so Mitty was asking, this was in the line of if you're a fan of The Simpsons, you'd be familiar with this line of questioning that he had. But Mr. Benson, your sports book seems to have the momentum of a runaway freight train. Why are you so popular?
I think there's a lot of popularity in what we're doing, particularly from gambling Twitter, in the sense that we're different. And I think when you look, if you take Circus Sports out of the equation and you look at the FanDuels, the DraftKings, the MGMs, the Point Bets, the Barstools of the world, they're all the same thing. And I think we've been a refreshing take and a refreshing addition to the industry in the 3.5 years that we've been in operation. And I think that's why we've had a lot of success and a lot of popularity early in what we're doing. And then I think when you think about a lot of, the companies that I just discussed, they're kind of faceless and nameless corporations in which bettors are really just kind of a number there. And I think what we're doing here at Circus Sports, when you think of Derek, who's our CEO and owner, Mike Palm, who's our, VP, Matt Metcalf, Chris Bennett, myself, there's faces and names, for the people to kind of associate with. And I think, what we do on Twitter and what we do, on social media and things like that, I think there's an organicness and a transparency and an honesty to it, that you maybe don't get or see from other operators. And I think that really resonates, with a lot of different gamblers. And I would say that's, between that and the limits we've been able to offer and originating things when we can. And, the two best football contests in the world, and the world's largest three-story sports book, the world's largest pool amphitheater. I think between some of those things, and being different than, the traditional cookie cutter sports book, that's just kind of stuck in the corner of a casino, with, people who don't necessarily know how to run it. I would say, those are maybe some of the things that have helped differentiate ourselves and, allowed us to find some success here early in our time operating.
Okay. And I forgot to ask this question in the Twitter portion, but when you were talking about like how, you have your personal tweets, you have your business related tweets. Have you ever had a conflict where like something you said on the personal side of a tweet kind of, made you either somebody like on that you work with, either like Derek or somebody said like, hey, like delete that, or like, has anyone ever come to you and said like, you shouldn't say that, or like, are they, pretty, open with
By
that?
and large, I have a lot of freedom to do
Okay.
and say what I want on my Twitter. And that's all credit to Derek and Matt in terms of the non-corporateness of, the company that we run and things like that. But
Sure.
I'm certainly careful about things that I do say and things that I don't say, and how I come off, and certainly trying not to construe some of my own frustrations within the industry as necessarily speaking on behalf of Circus Sports and vice versa.
Okay. All right. The next question here was, how does the rise in popularity of props affect the survivability of the Circa model?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I think when you think about the market, the market's ultimately going to dictate what bettors want. And, in 5, 10, 15 years, if bettors predominantly want to wager on props, as opposed to betting on pregame sides, totals, and money lines, that'll certainly have to be something that we think about, in terms of what we offer and the quantity of things that we offer. So I would say for us, our menu continues to grow each and every day. Obviously, props and same game parlays and things of that nature have become the industry norm, and certainly been just as popular, if not more popular, than the pregame sides, totals, and money lines,
Okay.
or the meat and potato offerings that have been so commonplace for so long. So I would say as the industry adapts, we'll certainly adapt. We're working on doing some different things in terms of automation and pricing, that will allow us to put up more on our menu, and to do so across the 3 or 4 states that we operate in, and really scale at a bigger level. And I think when you peel back his question, I think the important part is you can have 1,000 props on your menu, but the surface area that you have to cover as a bookmaker is so large and wide. And in turn, to do so, you have to have much lower limits on a lot of these things, which doesn't necessarily fit with our brand. So
Sure.
for us, as we continue to grow our team, have better software technology, pricing, all of these different things, I think you'll see that we will add more stuff on our menu. But when we do, we want to make sure that we're not putting up props that people can bet $25 on. We want to make sure that we're putting up props that people can bet $1,000 on. And I think when you do that, you have to have a very experienced bookmaking team, that has the ability to cover that surface area, and really not just price the props, but also book them when the bets come in. And it's easy to make a number on a lot of these different things. It's easy to make a number on Kevin Durant points scored, all these different things. But actually having somebody to book that, and actually, putting a ton of resources towards that, I would say that would be the thing that, we would struggle with, not necessarily the pricing aspect, but, once these things go up and you're taking large limits on them, having the ability to book them. So I would say
Okay.
that's something that we're certainly working on in the future. But the market will dictate, the things that we have to put on our menu based on what bettors want to wager on. And, if bettors, if that 50-50 split in terms of betting pregame versus betting in game, or for the Super Bowl, betting, money line total spread versus props, if that continues to widen and it widens more towards the market wants to bet props, we'll certainly have to adjust with that.
Okay. All right. We have, so yeah, we had a list of questions here from Desi of Hoops, who I happened to meet a couple of months ago in San Diego. Great guy, by the way. I don't know if he's made it out to Vegas to introduce himself to you, but he's a good guy. So yeah, his first question here is, do you guys have a preferred power rating for each sport, and why is it team rankings? And I should emphasize that he does work for team rankings, so that's kind of why he said that.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have a preferred power ranking for each sport. It's really dependent upon which risk manager is doing said sport. So, Chris Bennett will have his own power ratings for NFL and baseball, which he's doing. Matt Metcalf will have his own, proprietary power rankings for college basketball, college football.
Okay.
Jeff Davis is going to have his own stuff and his models for NHL. The different things that we do, NASCAR, boxing, all these different things. Paul Zilm does our Kentucky Derby future pool. I mean, I think there's a lot of different hands on the things that we originate. And we're not necessarily looking at market-based power ratings from, a number fire or a team rankings, or, a Massey Peabody, or all these different things that are out there. I think a lot of what we do is proprietary to the risk manager who's managing the specific market and who's originating that. And I would say a lot of that stuff is proprietary to that individual based on their model, their numbers, their metrics, and the things that they think are important to what goes into their number.
Okay. And his next one here was about your thoughts on right angle sports or any other touts known to move the market. There might be some info you can't give away. He understands that, but if there's anything you'd be willing to share about your thoughts on the tout, the bigger touts that might be able to move the markets.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's certainly an interesting discussion. Obviously there's a lot of people out there nowadays who are selling picks. I would tell a lot of people not to buy picks, not to go down that rabbit hole, to be very careful who you're buying from, things like that. I mean, obviously Right Angle Sports is probably one of the best in the business. They have a lot of market influence. It just depends on what you want to do. I mean, if you're trying to have a lot of account longevity and things like that, jamming Raz plays into, DraftKings and FanDuel and some of these softer books, I think that's going to, probably get you cut off quickly. But I think being able to also utilize their information to help to help shape your handicap, to get closing line value. I think there's just a ton of things that go into it. I have nothing bad to say about those guys. There's a lot of people who play Raz stuff, into Circa Sports, which is perfectly fine and acceptable on our end. We have no issue with it. At this point, with social media and Twitter and things like that, I'd say it's just part of the market. I don't really have anything, negative or positive to say about Raz in particular. Like I said, it's a very popular service. There's a lot of people who use it. There's a lot of people who bet into us using it, knowing that they're not going to get cut off and things like that. So, I feel good about the fact that we're able to provide liquidity to people who are utilizing their service and things like that. But, from a general tout perspective, nothing to do with Raz.
Sure.
Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of buying picks, and I think there's a lot of bad actors out there. Not talking about Raz, just other people in general.
Yeah, like you said, certainly not advocating for them or anyone else. So, okay, so yeah, his next one was related to handles here. So he was mentioning, obviously the different handles you're going to get a lot of handle on, a bit huge handle on Super Bowl, World Cup, things like that. Are there any events that people would be surprised to hear have huge handles, like maybe outside of the major sports, or maybe major sports that maybe like certain events or days or something that might get more volume?
I mean, because we're one of the few places that have a Kentucky Derby future pool up, we see a ton of bets into that market.
Okay.
When you look at Iowa, they're popular about rustling. So we get a lot of rustling handle
Okay.
in Iowa. I think it's just specific to the market and things like that. We just put up our college football exacta, in which you could bet like, Georgia to defeat Michigan, TCU to defeat Ohio State, things like that.
Okay.
We're the exacta markets, I would say, are one of the most popular exotic markets that we put up. People just love betting those matchups and kind of pontificating on team A versus team B and getting, better prices than just specifically betting one of the teams to, make the Super Bowl or things like that. So
Sure.
I would say, between, the rustling that we see in Iowa, the Kentucky Derby future pool that we're able to book here in Nevada, I would say those are two things that see, a decent amount of handle that would have otherwise surprised me.
Okay.
But I would say the thing that we receive, from outside of a major market that we receive the most amount of bets on, I would say the exactas that we see, for the Super Bowl, for college football, for playoff baseball, things like that. That's going to be one of the most popular things that our bettors have really gravitated towards.
Okay. His next question here, he was wondering if there was what sports, if any, if you're willing to take a big stand on compared to the rest of the market. Now, I guess that could be, the fact that you have larger limits, that might be, maybe implied, but are there any ones that you would say that you take a bigger stand on?
Yeah, I would say the sports that we originate. We'll take a pretty big stand on NFL, given that we're taking $200,000 limits day of.
Sure.
We feel comfortable with where our numbers at. By the time we get to game time, college football, Matt Metcalf, in my opinion, is the smartest odds maker and the smartest bookmaker in the world. We'll certainly take positions as it relates to college football. We do the same with baseball, with Chris Bennett, who manages that market. He's one of the best, he's the best baseball guy I've ever known. Jeff Davis does a fantastic job with golf and hockey. So I would say, some of the stuff that we're really originating, and some of the stuff that we have the highest limits on, that's going to be the stuff that we take the biggest stands on.
Okay.
Sometimes the things that we're not necessarily originating in terms of, soccer, and things, like that. I would say we don't necessarily take as big of a stand on, and we're more just market based,
Okay.
when it comes to looking at the screen.
Now, yeah, so like, yeah, when you say originate, you mean that you're not the ones creating the line, you're kind of mirroring what like certain other books either offshore or in Vegas are doing?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we originate most everything that we do, and we have people who are booking that. But as it relates to maybe soccer or some of these lower level things that we maybe don't have a full time odds maker for, or things like that, we would maybe go more market based, or maybe not take as big of a stand on, as we would some of the other sports that we are originating, if that makes sense.
Okay. And his last question here was related to, I guess it's kind of self-indulging myself here, but your favorite past episode of the Bebonos podcast?
I enjoyed the episode that you had with Lindemann. I thought that was a really good episode. Obviously, he worked for us, and I know him well. So yeah, I would say that was one of my favorites.
Okay. Now, yeah, have you met like any, like in the ones that you've listened to, have you met any of those people personally, or were you, like,
I can't think of them off the top of my head, but
okay,
I'm sure I've met, or dealt with, on Twitter and interacted with, a ton of the people that you've had on before.
okay. And then there was a question from yesterday. Um, there was somebody, Benny, he was asking about why 5 point dogs in NFL are such a consistent good bet many years. I don't know. Like, I kind of get the impression that, maybe it's short-term randomness, but
Yeah,
maybe
a
if,
hundred, 100%.
or,
Um,
just, yeah, because I don't know. I think, you might get an imprint of, like, certain lines, and you just kind of think
that's the
that,
other, that's the other misconception, that I see a lot, people talking about trends and, oh, the Bengals are 5-0 in their last 5 Thursday night football games on artificial turf when the
yeah,
temperature is less than 44 degrees. Yeah. To me,
yeah,
all that stuff is kind of noise and garbage. And, there's always going to be maybe too small a sample size and too large a sample size. And, for the specific thing that you're looking at, what's the perfect sample size, and to me, a lot of that trend stuff is noise. When you think about a matchup that happened, between the Bengals and the Ravens, 15 years ago, to me, that has nothing to do with what is going into the number for this week, per se. So for me, I would say 5 point favorites in the NFL have done well this year because it's a small sample size. I think when you equate that over X amount of seasons, you're probably going to be pretty close to break even,
sure,
if not, 50-50, in which, when you factor in the big or the juice, it's a losing proposition. So I would
sure,
say there's a lot of, short-term variance, or randomness, when you think about trends, and the way they're talked about. But when you actually, peel back, the layers and you look at why a line is a line because that's what the market believes it is. And when you factor in the information that bettors have and the information that bookmakers have, that's how they got to a certain number. And I think a lot of times when people talk about those kind of things, it's already baked into the market
yeah.
and the number, or B, it's something that's not quantifiable and really doesn't matter in terms of the handicap.
Yeah, the part about baked into the line was the thing that I was going to mention, is that if it is actually a trend that does have, like, actual relevance to the game, that, by now, in the age of, 2022, with all the information that we have, that it would that it would already be into the line. So,
Correct.
um, okay, so that was actually the end of the listener questions. Is there any last thoughts that you have before we wrap up?
No, I appreciated the listener questions, and certainly, enjoyed the Christmas topics as well. And
Yeah,
yeah, I appreciate, you giving me the time and being able to highlight, some of the positive things I think we're doing at Circus Sports, and, also being able to kind of shine a spotlight on some of the areas and some of the things that I think we could improve upon, because, we appreciate the feedback from, our players. And, the goal every day is to get better. And, if we can get better and grow our market share and increase our outreach and bring sports betting the way it should be to as many people as possible in this great country, then, I think that'll ultimately be how we, how we become a net positive within this industry. So
okay.
yeah, like I said, I appreciate, the time that you gave me, and,
Yeah,
certainly look forward to, getting this out there, on my, social media, and having our, Circus Sports handle retweeted as well.
okay, great. Yeah, and yeah, I'll say that, I did have the chance to go see the book last year when I was in um, Vegas. I was with my wife, but I didn't actually get a chance to bet any of the sports. We ended up going there after, like, a steak dinner somewhere, and I won money at the roulette table. That's all I could say when I was
Good.
there. So, I did have a positive experience with that. But I would like to go back there at some point to, because, yeah, it was the most impressive book, I'll say, just in person, that I've seen. Just like you said, the most of the other books that I've seen, don't treat the sports book as a priority. You could kind of tell, you know, the investment that a book that a casino puts into a sports book based on where they have it located. First of all,
Yeah, I mean, we built a sports book so big we had to build a casino around it.
so
Whereas, most places just tuck it in the corner and
yeah,
it's kind of an afterthought.
yeah, and you know, I've been to plenty of those, and yeah, you kind of know what you're getting into with those, and hey, that's fine. That's, you know, everyone has their, you know, their, you know, little sports book need. You know, you don't necessarily always need like the, you know, to throw a lot of money down, but like if you're, you know, if you're looking for a big sports book, like yeah, that's as big of a sports book as I've ever seen. So I am interested to see how it's going to look. I don't know if I'll get to the, because I think it's on the north side of Illinois that you guys are. It's like Waukegan or um,
Yeah, we'll be in Waukegan.
yeah,
It's called the Temporary at American Place.
okay,
It'll be a small sports book to start with. It'll be a 3 window, multiple kiosk sports book to start with, given that they're building the main property right now.
okay,
And then in a couple of years, once they finish the main property, you can expect to have a Nevada-based Circa Sports similar setup out in
okay.
Illinois, which I think will be fantastic, for anyone out in the state.
Yeah, and yeah, it's I just kind of thought about it now. The location of the book is, you know, pretty close to Wisconsin too, so I'm sure that'll be kind of nice for those people on the north side of us here there. But yeah, Jeff, I appreciate you joining, and you know, thank you very much for your time and your patience and answering all the questions that we had here. So enjoy the holiday season, enjoy your new year, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, thanks again,
Thanks for
and
having me on. I appreciate it.
yeah, and everyone, once again, thanks for listening. Enjoy your holiday, whatever you celebrate, Christmas, Hanukkah, what have you. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.